You're listening to the Veteran Etc. podcast, as there's always more to be said about a veteran. Join your host, Mike Kim, a veteran, ex-monk, seasoned war trauma therapist, and writer, as he shares his years of research in veteran readjustment culture and the meaning of warrior life. Now, here's your host, Mike Kim.
Veteran Etc. This is a show that's dedicated to not just veteran magazines, not just veteran headlines, not just veteran movies, TV shows, but the intricate conversations, the group chats, the different ways of outreach that veterans have with one another. And on this episode, we're very fortunate to have a close friend, as well as someone who's been inspirational to the veteran community, Buddy Hackett, a Marine, as well as a Norwich University Military College of Vermont graduate, an entrepreneur, a humanitarian, and much, much more. Today, we kind of leave it off to the military and music, war and music, but we're also going to talk about many other themes and the wonderful nonprofit organization that he has for veterans. I just can't wait to hear more. And so, Buddy, welcome to Veteran Etc.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you having me.
Great. Is there anything I left off? I know I possibly could have left the Norwich University Irish American Club that you once headed and presided over. Any other accolades I should mention?
Maybe I did a lot of rugby playing at Norwich too. That was a big thing. Actually, I mean, some serious stuff like the Semper Fidelis Association.
Yeah,
that was a big deal. I was president of that for a short amount of time.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that, acting as that intermediary, that between the actual Marine Corps, the school itself, and then boots on the ground, and trying to keep everyone going in the right direction and help them out where we could. I enjoyed doing that.
Can I ask you this question, because all these new academic yahoos and new jacks that are coming into the veteran scene. They don't know that veterans and academics go back a long way. But I remember the Persian Gulf War, 1990, 1991. That was a war that you were actively involved in. You and a few others from Norwich actually left, either left or had shortly graduated and were deployed, to war, and had to come back to get degrees and all that. And I was just wondering, can you share a little bit about that? Because you being Semper Fi Association, leadership, that, putting people together, it's not easy to keep people together when they're going through their own challenges, and it's meaningful. So can you share some things about that?
Sure. I mean, the thing about the Marines at Norwich were, even though we were all one big group, we all had a sort of our different pieces in it. There were guys that were scholarship guys that were going to do their 4 years, and somewhere along the way they were doing PLC or OCS, graduate, get their bars and move on. There were other folks that were prior enlisted that had their Marine Corps career and then were moving on to their academic. Then there were guys that were sort of somewhere in between, where they had either prior enlisted or were in the reserves to go to Norwich. And that's kind of where my group was. There was 14 of us that were any range. I remember like Joby Fisha, he was a kid. He just went to boot camp and he graduated from boot camp. And about a week later, he gets a call saying, yeah, we're getting activated. Never went to his school. I mean, he did OJT in combat. I mean, that was pretty impressive. And there was a handful of guys like that. The folks that were at Norwich, our reserve unit, we were different because we were a lot of smart guys that, you know, they wanted to work smarter, not harder, and didn't put up with a lot of the sort of lance corporal, you know, nonsense. So when we left, it was we were a known entity. We were a group. We had bonded, and we were strong. We were tight. So we looked out for each other. The Gulf War for me was very weird because they broke us up, and our sort of leadership, our officer corps wanted medals and ribbons and things like that. So we got broken up into all these little smaller groups and sort of poured out to other bigger elements. So, you know, cast a bigger net, get more fish, right? That was their thing. So we had our group that got splintered and then came back together. We were we were reservists, so we got zero respect. Went over there, you know, the entire time we're over there, they're like, oh yeah, screw you guys reservists. And we got last bit of gear, last bit of whatever. And even to the time when the war was over, almost everyone had gone home, and we're still sitting waiting for planes because we were the friggin' reservists. They're like, you know, you guys go last. We flew into Cherry Point, and I don't want to sound negative because I love
no. This is important because this is part of history, and it also points out certain things about the military that, you know, from what I heard, they made some of those corrections later on, you know, with the war on terror and everything. They made a couple of those adjustments, but to talk about that, what you experience, and this is a wealth of knowledge for a lot of folks because, you know, they just think you know, you just deploy and it's 1, 2, 3, and you don't realize there's different rotations that go on. There's different levels of intensity. We're going to talk about music and everything, but like the intensity, and I think that's the value in the movie of Jarhead, right? Because they call the Persian Gulf War a so-called short war, but I would say out of all of my extensive military studies, it was the most intensive war in American history, including World War II, Vietnam, and the global war on terror. I believe it's a continuation of this global war on terror, but not only that, the most concentrated type of warfare that you're going to find as far as intensity, where you know, every day you're moving, you know what I mean? And
Right.
it's not PlayStation during downtime. It's not whatever in the Pacific, swimming from here to eternity. It's not going down to Saigon or whatever. You know what I mean? I'd say Korea and the Persian Gulf War are the most intensive military wars in American history. You know, if not, you know, in you know, compared to all of military history, but definitely American history.
It was definitely different, you know. The challenge being a reserve unit going in and being paired up. Originally, we were attached to First Marine Division, and they said, "Oh, we made a mistake," because we had always been training. Our parent unit as a reservist was Second Marines down in Lejeune. So for some reason, they hooked us up with First Marines. Oh, we made a mistake. Send you back to Second Marines, and then initially they wanted us to be sort of fill-in troops, because the idea going way back, I don't know if too many people remember this, but we were going against like the second largest military in the world. And when the Marines are trained back then, it was always 7-1 in our favor. There's always going to be 7 Marines against 1 enemy. And it was turned around the other way. The Iraqi army was so big and so powerful, they said, was going to be 7-1 against. So we went through this whole stage where we're getting our act together. We're getting, because it wasn't like we jumped on planes and flew over. It took time. We ended up going from Manchester to Lejeune. We did jungle training.
Let me interrupt you before you go into that. So a lot of people also don't realize that Manchester Marines, a unit that I highly regard. So it was like one of those focal units during the Cold War that was to be directly involved in cold weather northern warfare, to deploy, within an emergency, like in Europe. My understanding from also exposure, the limited time I had exposure, the just very solid training in cold weather training, the very little training that I had with the Manchester Marines. But
no, exactly right. You're exactly right. It was a cold weather unit, and we were paired up with European units or Slavic units. We would train in Norway quite often because it was going to be that way into the Soviet Union. It was cold weather unit in the Cold War, so that was kind of the thing. Which was funny that we got activated for a desert war. But yeah.
So then you guys leave from Manchester, you head to Lejeune, and then you're saying something about jungle training and all this other stuff?
Yeah, we're doing jungle training, and we did some mount training and all this stuff. I'm not sure they knew what to expect, because when we ended up, because like I say, it ramped up to get to the point where we actually deployed. So we ended up, we had to meet, we all met up at the reserve center. So that's one level of like anxiety. Then we get down to Lejeune and we start training down there. It ramps up a little bit. And you could see the stages, because this is like something out of, if you saw like a World War II movie, everyone moving and troops moving, you could see who's going next. We're in our camouflage utilities, and then all of a sudden you get your desert utilities, and you know that you're next to fly over. So you get your desert utilities, then you stage at Cherry Point, where you pick up aircraft to fly overseas. So and then when we got overseas, we had commercial airlines. We had like Northwest or whatever it was that we flew over on. We landed on the tarmac, unloaded our gear by hand, and walked into the desert. We were the only foot mobile unit in that whole theater of operation. So when you say you did something different every day, we displaced every day. We tried to dig fighting holes every day, which, if you haven't dug in the desert, in the Saudi desert or the Kuwaiti desert, there's 6, 7, 8 inches of sand, and then you're in this hard packed coral, whatever it is. And that little entrenching tool, I mean, 6'2" guy, I have to have my arms out, and I need to have 5.5 foot deep hole. I'm not getting that. So we ended up having these little, just very narrow, we call them like shallow graves. We cut them as deep as we could, but it was more horizontal than vertical. And then the gear they gave us, everything that they told us, it started, like I was saying, 7-1 against. Now they're saying that field protective mask that you have, that we did all the training with, that's probably not going to work. That atropine pen that you're going to use after you get hit with a nerve agent, that's probably not going to work. And a lot of things like that happen. And then we end up having this meeting where they say, all the big wig battalion and above officers, they say, we're not the enemy. You are going to experience 85% or more casualties, because you are going to be at the tip of the spear. Whether you're going to be in front of Task Force Troy, Task Force Ripper, Task Force Papa Bear, whatever they were, the reservists were going to be at the tip of that spear, and we got nicknamed the Speed Bump Battalion, because we were going to soften their defenses with all these, what they say, the friggin' reservists. We'll send them in first, and then we'll see what happens. But the way that the speed of how things happened once the ground war started, it was about 4 days, and then it was over. But there was also from January till, I don't know, April,
Yeah.
that 24 hours a day of B-52s pummeling that area, Tomahawk missiles pummeling that area, 3 impenetrable lines of defense. They were putting so much firepower down. They ran sortie after sortie between the US, the French, the British. We saw it was something out of a training manual, because we saw every piece of aircraft go overhead, whether it was between helicopters, jets, bombers, and then guided missiles, and then as we were getting closer, it turned into artillery and just completely softened that area. So when they say it was only a 4-day war, some of these guys came out, they had dried blood coming out of their ears, and they were wearing sandbags because they didn't have shoes. They were defeated. But if you go off to the west, where those Republican Guard were, they were well trained and well supplied. So when, I forget what it was, Third Army, whoever did that flanking blow came across, I mean, they saw some strong fighting there, tank fighting and whatnot. But yeah, it was living in the desert for the first time in your life was difficult. Saddam had blown up the one of the pipelines that went underneath the Persian Gulf. So we got our water from a desalination plant. So now our water had been, now we, like, you get a canteen a day. You know, you're supposed to run on 10 gallons of water a day in the desert. Now we're getting a 1-quart canteen a day. So there was a lot of challenges like that. And then, you know, they didn't know what to do with, we had so many different shots and pills and different things they gave us that came in, you know, unmarked bottles and whatnot. You know, we were just a science experiment.
Can I also ask you this, because a lot of people they don't understand the concept, and maybe you can clarify this. It's kind of been forgotten, but this whole issue of the uranium depleted rounds, can you
Mm-hmm.
help the audience maybe understand the dynamic of that and how that could possibly have some, well, not possibly, but even, you know, probability laden health effects due to, you know.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I mean, there was a chemical cocktail that was out there just because of the battlefield, but depleted uranium, anything I'm going to say maybe 20 millimeter and larger, could have had a depleted uranium option. So
Around the, yeah.
flying overhead, A-10s,
Mm,
anything like that is throwing it all across in front of us. Artillery, we did actually a work party where we helped load a bunch of British Challenger tanks with sabot rounds that were made of depleted uranium. So we're in desert cami trousers, brown t-shirt, and taking these rounds out of cardboard tubes and handed them to the gun crew that load them into the tanks. So we had that. Like I said, we had the pills. We had anthrax pills. We had anti what do you call it? Nerve agent pills. We had all different shots and whatnot. But we had exposed to everything. And I'm going to say I had 4 cancers. And every one of my doctors said the same thing, that they're all related to each other and they're all related to exposure. So when you have burning oil fires and you're breathing all that, you get that petrochemical poisoning, you're burning everything. You're burning trash, you're burning human feces, the chemicals that they sprayed to keep the bugs down, whatever you sprayed on yourself to keep the bugs away. There was one point in time we actually were hit with sarin gas from a artillery shell, that it was one of those artillery shells that went off, and it was sort of a not very audible pop, and then thousands, if not millions of bugs were suddenly dead on the ground that just came out of the air and dead. So that hit us as well. And now guys that when, I mean, as young guys, as 20 years old, it wasn't that big of a deal. You know, we're sitting in these burning oil fires and we're smoking Marlboros and chewing Copenhagen. You know, we didn't think about tomorrow. But at 25 years old, guys are getting leukemia. Guys are getting ALS. Guys are getting different forms of cancer in their early 20s that they shouldn't be getting. There are guys that had this amazing fatigue that they couldn't even get out of bed. There was all these different things. And I felt like it was the same thing as like Agent Orange from Vietnam, that, you know, all these guys are sick and we're not doing anything about it. But in hindsight, I really think that they were just gathering data, trying to get as much information as they could so they could have some sort of solution. But, you know, I ended up with pancreatic cancer. I had a brain tumor. I had a tumor in my spinal cord, and I had a tumor in my salivary gland that were all needed to be removed. And then when you throw in on top of that, you know, chemo, radiation, just the effect of so many surgeries and the anesthesia, at 50 years old, all of a sudden I felt like I was 70 years old. So yeah. It's a challenge, but I feel I'm lucky, and I got to do everything I got to do. And a lot of guys say, "Oh, I'm broken and this and that." I'm blessed, not broken, because I can still stand up. I can still tell the stories. I can still brag about being a Marine, because the best thing about being in the Marines, and you know this, fellow brother Marine, is you can bust everyone else's balls in the entire world because you are a Marine. You know, so that's where we're at.
And I love you for that. I want to share a little bit, because when I first started podcasting back in 2016, thanks to Rudy Reyes and Matt DeMeo from Condition One Energy Bars, and Warfighter Radio Network, and Prudence and all, and Terry and all that, and Mike Rice, and it was just a great thing that was going on, because, you know, it was warrior wellness, and we were talking about different topics, and I just thought, you know, well, you know, back then you were into, you know, your music and all these different things, and I just wanted to reconnect with you. And then we had that great show about war and music, and we'll, you know, in the future have more shows to discuss that, and we'll touch on it on this show. But, you know, I wanted that show kept for some reason. And, you know, when I heard that you had been hospitalized for the cancer, I really wanted to reach out to Marines and to Norwich folks and send them that great show that we did. And the archives just had lost that show, and so it's taken many years, you know, to wait until you felt better, wait until, you know, I had, you know, a new show and everything to kind of make this happen. So this is a special show for me and for you. And I guess, you know, when you said that whole thing about being a Marine, you know, I always connected with you because I kind of felt like you were, you know, a Marine's Marine. And there are a few that I can say that about. And so I just always appreciate that connection. And so to continue on with the shows so that the audience gets a taste of like what we covered in that one show that was lost. I know that in Jarhead and Apocalypse Now, you know, and especially Jarhead, there were like, you know, all different tunes, whether it was, you know, Naughty by Nature or, you know, heavy metal, you know, they would play that like in the desert. I was wondering what type of accuracy was that, like when you had some downtime or whatever, what type of music was playing.
Yeah, no, that was for real. When downtime's a funny thing. Downtime didn't really happen until after the ground war was done, and we ended up taking, a couple thousand prisoners. So we now had a different mission where we had to process them. But then that I had mentioned before, we had to wait for everyone else to leave. So now we're in these big GP tents. We're in a tent city. We're in this it was a division support area, and now things started to come in like care packages and stuff like that. So this is back in the day of cassettes, and CDs were just starting to be a thing. So people would mail over cassettes and whatnot, and guys would have their little handheld radios. And yeah, like Naughty by Nature, whatever was going on then, that kind of music happened there. But there was also the other piece of it that was the psyops piece of it, which I got to tell you, this is one of the coolest moments. This is like a Hollywood moment for me, but it was real life. Where we were on the border berm, there was this 30-40 foot sand berm that they had created between the border of Saudi Arabia and Kuwait that ran from the Gulf, hundreds of miles to the west. So when it came time to be getting ready to do that push and start that ground war, they had heavy equipment came in and cut chunks out of this border berm. So it was access to get in to the sandbox and start the fight, right? So this is now, the sun is going down, and it's one of those like deep purpley orangey red sunsets, and I hear this weird like hurdy-gurdy, like a sort of whining sound, and this old Huey with a couple of huge speakers hanging off it, as it comes over the border berm and into our presence. It's the first line out of In the Evening from Led Zeppelin. And it was at that beginning that like, and you hear them, in the evening, and right as they're flying over, the drums are pounding, guitars are cranked, and they played all those old like Break On Through and the Doors, and there was just stuff that was that classic rock at the time, and that stuff was cranking while we were moving forward. So that was really cool. That was one of those things that I will never forget that image. It's ingrained in my head, and it's awesome.
That is definitely one of those Apocalypse Now moments,
Oh yeah, definitely, just like that.
Yeah. So let me ask you, what's your connection with music? Why do you find it healing? I know that you were playing in a band. You're a man of many great hats, and you were in a band and you played, and it was great. Just always seeing pictures of you playing and people really just being happy, exposed to you, and just like what was that all about? What got you into music?
Yeah, so from whenever I can't remember when I started playing guitars and stuff like that. I was a kid, young, like I don't know, must have been fifth or sixth grade or whatever when music starts. And that was like my genre, was that old school classic rock stuff back then. The Who, Led Zeppelin, all those bands. And then there was a mix of some of the newer stuff that was coming out, like Van Halen at the time was new. Yeah, that's how old we are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I always played in bands. I loved music. I think music was one of those ways. I'm going to diagnose myself as I had ADHD as a kid, and music helped me focus. So it was one of those things. And someone said recently that if you struggle with math, you need to listen to more music, because everything about music is mathematical. It's an equation that happens. And it was a light popped in my head. I said, well, that actually makes a lot of sense. I couldn't focus on anything as a kid. I was one of those Ritalin kids. You get in line at after lunch and at the nurse's office, and there's 40 kids in line, and you take your pill and then you go off for the rest of the day. So yeah, that was a challenge. But being in bands was always, it was exciting, you know. You see people enjoying, and I was a bass player too, so the
Mhm.
big joke is that
Yeah,
you know,
rhythm, man.
the guitarist gets you out on the dance floor, but the bass player makes you feel it, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was in a bunch of bands as a kid. I took some time off, you know, life gets in the way, go to the Marine Corps, Norwich, job, whatever. And then I had gotten back into some bands here and there. You play at the VFW, the American Legion, stuff like that. It's good, but you're right there in front of the people. You can see the effect of what you're doing on those people in front of you. It's always a positive thing, you know. So that was really good. And unfortunately, yeah, when I got sick, I I was unable to continue on doing that, but it's okay. I mean, I still have. I mean, I'm sitting here in my office, and right to my side, I have a little bass guitar just in case I want to do something and avoid what's going on, you know.
What's
But
your favorite what's your favorite tune that you feel that you just hit it, you just know it, you hit it, you do it well. That tune?
it's gonna be it's a funny song because it's "Can't Find My Way Home,"
Okay.
and it's by Blind Faith, you know, Stevie Winwood.
Yeah.
A lot of people have covered it, and it was funny because I present the last band I was in, I presented it to the guys, and I said, "This means a lot to me because when you go off, you can be in the military and train all you want. It doesn't do that same change that when you leave and go into a war zone, you do that, excuse me, that combat tour, you lose a piece of you, that little boy inside, that innocence or whatever. So that song always hit me like, can't find my way home. You know, only 80% of Buddy came back. There's still some that was left over there, and that always the first couple of notes on that always gets me going. You
I
know,
think it's powerful that you're able to relate the music to readjustment, because there's just something about, and I wasn't really a big, uh two doors down kind of guy. I like Wu-Tang, and I do like classic rock and stuff. I was a big Rush guy, but I like a lot of hip hop and stuff. But there's just something about, I'd make fun of people, who play, like Two Doors Down, and it's just like those songs, like you said, they just like hit home because they just kind of have themes of like readjustment that I could still listen to them today, and there's still something that comes up, when I think of you know, that uh, readjustment process and everything, and even uh, my son's mom and everything, and so I appreciate your message in that, because I think our audience just kind of thinks of music as like, oh, Apocalypse Now, they had, the Doors, that was cool, and Jarhead had Naughty by Nature, and even going back to like World War II with all those crooner hits and all that, but people don't realize. And I remember, a mentor of mine who was a Vietnam War vet, but he was a war baby. His father was a World War II vet, um, and met his wife, who was this therapist's mother. I guess the parents met in England while the father was deployed, and met at one of these, dances, and it was through music and dance that they met. He brought her over to the United States, and this guy had always said to me, even like when he was like in Vietnam, some of the doo-wop songs, or I just remember in the office he was always playing, it was always loud, the doo-wop songs, and 60s songs, like going to the chapel and just everything that, we kind of grew up with watching on TV, like either in China Beach or, all these TV shows and Vietnam War movies. But he didn't have the language to say it how you said it, which I think is important. Again, it's part of veteran culture. It's not just the tunes, right? But what are the meanings, right? Like he
right.
ended up telling me that he met his wife. She was in the military too, as he was ready to deploy to Vietnam. And she was like, I don't know, she was like a medic or something, but she stayed and he ended up going. But like going to the chapel was like one of those songs, and so it's like the meanings, right? And that they're tied, like you said, to the deployment, to the experience that people don't really know. And unless you ask or unless you offer that, it's all going to be hidden.
Yeah, and the more and more I think about it, I think about the popular music at the time. Like Madonna was huge,
Oh, yeah.
and she had that whole thing that Vogue,
Yeah,
the
Vogue,
the
yeah, yeah.
dance and everything. So of course Marines changed the words on it, and we called it Pogue. It's like do this and do that. But yeah,
It's awesome, man. I didn't even
I had
know
this
that.
guy, one of our corpsmen, we called him our pocket doc. He was like 5'2", and he was just Pigpen. He was just a shovel,
Insane.
but he had this little radio that had a speaker on it, and he could put tapes in, and he always had something going, and it depended on who he got the music from. Like, say it was like one of his boys from back home, and he gets uh, I don't know, maybe it was like Biggie and Tupac or something like that, or whatever, and he's listening to that. Then he gets something like from his mom, and it's like you say, like the going
First
to the
Rice,
chapel.
yeah.
What was the hooked on? It was hooked on something, hooked on swing or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, hooked on swing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like that. And had the big bands playing,
Yeah.
or if he got it from his girlfriend, it would be like Sabi. So it was always something different, and it was like we called him the pocket doc, the jukebox. He play put something else in, and but yeah, music was one of those things that I think, and it still does it. It just gets your mind off of what the stressors are or what those triggers are. They're gonna set you off.
Didn't you like also like going to the clubs, during training and stuff like that, where, there was always kind of crazy music that you wouldn't really, I don't know, be exposed to usually, but you ended up liking it because everyone else liked it?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
Wasn't that
so
great? Like at Camp Giggles and Camp
oh yeah,
Geiger,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
We used to go over to New River Air Station,
Yeah.
and we go to the E Club there, and that was definitely the urban E Club because that was all the city kids were there, and you heard, um, oh, I can't even think of some of the stuff like Grandmaster
Yeah.
Flash, and
Cool
that
of
was
the
like,
Gang and all.
yeah, like the OG stuff, and then the newer stuff would come in. Like I mean,
Yeah,
like I
the
said,
new. Yeah.
like I think that was all when the early '90s was when that
Salt and Pepper.
Tupac.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
well,
and
I mean more like
and
the
and
coast,
Tupac.
yeah,
Yeah.
East Coast West Coast thing with Tupac and Biggie
Yeah.
Smalls and stuff like that's
Ice
happening.
T.
Yeah,
Ice T.
and
Yeah.
or NWA
NWA.
and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean yeah, there was a lot going on back then, and as a kid from a small town in Massachusetts, I never would have been exposed to that music.
Yeah. We had a
And the way
guy.
they played it,
Uh-huh.
well, the way they played it in the E clubs too was kind of like the dance mixes too. They'd have
Yes.
guys that
Yes.
were
Yeah.
actually, so you would get a song that was some sort of rap song, but the bass line or the whatever they were like sampling was could have been the Who Eminence Front, or it could have been some other rock band. Like, whoa, I know what that tune is. It's got that good groove, but something else is on top of it. So it was always cool seeing that stuff, hearing that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I there was a guy, and I think, I went to, so it was weird because I was like caught in between things. I was supposed to be, because of Anglico, I was supposed to um, uh, be really trained up in radios. But like, I just remember just hanging out with someone who, he had played hockey, I think, with, no, I don't know. He played hockey for, I think, Framingham State. This little guy, a little Irish guy, but just like you said, he was always hanging out with us at that E Club at New River, and he just he wasn't exposed to it, but he liked it, and he was part of us. I guess before a Vanilla Ice, he was just like part, and if things went down, he went down with us. Just really, 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 really cool guy. He had that,
Yeah.
Mickey Ward kind of accent. He looked like Mickey, like a shorter Mickey Ward. That's when I come to think of it. And he was like scrappy, like Steve Heel, like, but shorter. And just that, I mean, I think that was a great thing. Wouldn't you say that in the military, there's just like all, the beauty of it? I mean, we can, you'll find, a progressive like me always talking about, against the defense budget and all this stuff. But I always talk about the positive things about the military. And I would say that one of the great things of the military is that it's something where differences and similarities are brought together. It's not just like a brainwashing of trying to be programmed into, one type of person. Wouldn't you say that there's something to that?
Oh yeah, definitely. That sort of like melting pot. I think like in my case, being from a little town north of Boston, and then being in the Marine Corps, I think that being in the infantry, you have a lot more um, blue collar type folks. You got the guys that their family worked in mines or mills, or guys that came from very urban environment, from the cities and stuff like that. From New York, New Jersey, Chicago, and you never would have struck up a conversation with some of these other folks, because you kind of always worked in your own group. But then when you go in the Marine Corps, it was different, because the guy to the left of you and the guy to the right of you were your brothers. It didn't matter where they came from, but it got cool though when you went out to the E clubs, or you did this and that, and you got to sort of socialize off base. Then you hear the stories. They talk about, this is how I grew up, this is how I grew up, and that bonding happens. And it's funny to think back about some of the things that people would say, and it's
And the different lingos and the different yeah. So, some guy, he was supposed to be out in the West Coast, but for some reason, but he was from, and I'm part Latino, but he was from East LA, dude. Hardcore gang banging. I mean, back then, 80s and stuff like that. I'm shocked that they even accepted him, but like, he had a whole way of talking, and just like what you said, you uncover these things, and they educate you better than any Columbia University, Yale University, Norwich University education can offer, right? You know,
and they
um,
cut through all the bullshit too.
yes,
There's no sugarcoating anything. That your brother Marine can tell you whatever's on his mind,
that's right.
and it's never taken in a negative way. It's always like, hey man, whatever. It's just you take it, and whatever
Yeah,
the
hey,
information is,
devil
you lock it
dog.
away
Yeah,
somewhere and move
yeah,
on.
yeah. So let me also so I think this show has a lot of like hybridity this episode, because you and I have both grown since we last filmed, and we filmed, and most of it was on music, and that's a part of it. But I also like how you created a certain sense of meaning, especially, uh, you know, with the battle with cancer, and you're transcending that with, you know, providing for the community in regards to the veteran community awareness, interacting and also setting up a nonprofit, and also just, for all you guys that think, you and gals who think you're going to feel sorry for yourselves. I'm saying feel sorry for yourself, but when you're done feeling sorry for yourself, also recognize you've got potential. And someone like Buddy can, you know, really be like a symbol of that, because he created, a company that does well, and just I really admire just like, the different entrepreneurial projects, but also the humanitarian veteran projects. And so can you maybe start off with like the I know they're different, but can you start off with like some of the humanitarian veteran type of stuff that you've been involved in?
Well, since I got out of the Marine Corps, I've always felt that, oh, I actually, maybe that doesn't even have to do with the Marine Corps helps with the focus, but I'm at a point in my life where things are comfortable. You know what I mean? So if I was ever going to say that I'm a self-made man, I got here on my own, that's all lies. I I did sales for a long time, 20, 25 years, and I was very successful at it. And I like to say I reached the pinnacle. I reached the top of Everest at what I did, but I didn't do it alone. There was a lot of people that helped me get there. So when I look at other people and I say, you're just starting off, let me help you. Let me help you look over the fence and see what's in front of you. Because if I can make your life, 1% easier, your path easier, then that's giving back. I can't even tell you this. I guarantee there's people out there, like they looked at my resume and there was someone that said, yep, there's something about him, and put me on the good pile. That there, but I also know other people that were mentors along the way, and they said, all right, here's the deal. Work hard. That's what it is. No one's going to give you anything. Work hard. And I always tried to work smarter, not harder, because I know how to use a shovel. I know how to work that way. I can work up a sweat and get calluses on my hands, but I don't I don't want to do that. I don't enjoy doing that. I rather be in front of people. It's funny because when I'm home, I like to be alone. I like my quiet time, but when I'm at work, I enjoy being out in front of people and being and doing my thing, right? But like I say, along the way, people helped me. So I always think about service. I feel like I'm a man of service. I've always been from a little kid, whether it's, this is kind of an exaggeration, but helping the old lady across the street type of thing, to when I'm in a position of management where I actually use that position to help teach, bring young folks along and say, hey, you don't need to pound your head against the wall doing that, try this. And then to the point where, I'm vice president of sales and I have people working under me, and then I have my own company and I have people working under me, and every day is eye-opening, and people have challenges, and the challenge that a 20-year-old has is not the same challenge that a 55-year-old has. Some guys like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, my rent's due, this and that, the whole world's falling down around me. No worries, man. You still get your health, right? Let's figure this out. Take a step back, or look at it from a 20-story view. We'll figure it out, and then we'll move on. And it's just there is no definitive way of doing things. There is no one way. You
Let
always
me
have to
ask
have a
you
plan
this.
B.
This is awesome that you're saying this. While I have you, what is something that you learned from our school, our small little school up in Vermont that has generated titans, in many different areas? It just marvels me, whether it's, like that one semester I say, okay, I'm not gonna just focus on academics, and my health was a little bit better and stuff. And, I tried rugby and everyone was good guys, the late crate, Charlie, Salties, and Maury, I mean, these guys were just exceptional guys, you and others, Fallon, right? I don't know, is he up for general or something like that? I mean, he made colonel, right, in the Marine Corps.
Who's
James
this?
Fallon, little James
Oh, Jimmy
Fallon.
Fallon. Yeah, he Jimmy and I go way back.
I
His
know.
cousins lived
To
across the
say
street.
something about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so um, Jimmy and his cousins lived across the street from me when I was a kid growing up. So he grew up in Lynn, and I grew up in Lynn Field. So Lynn was like the tough city. Lynn Field was a small, community. So we knew each other, and we had probably not seen each other in 10 years or so. And then we see each other as freshmen at Norwich. We played rugby together, and Jimmy didn't go into the Marine Corps until a little bit later. And he did end up he was like a battalion commander out west, whatever. He was a rock solid guy, or is a rock solid guy, and retired as a colonel. But the rumors I heard was that he was, one of the guys being groomed to become a general officer. Well, you remember Kevin Jones?
Yeah,
Jonesy,
yeah, yeah. The
played
great
rugby
admiral.
with.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
funny because if they had to interview me and ask me about Jonesy never would have been an admiral. You know what I mean? And then there's like Doug Stitt. Doug Stitt's like a
Yes,
15-star
yeah,
general in the
yeah,
Army, man.
yeah.
And he was just a quiet kid.
Quiet.
And I think he's got a 3rd star.
Yeah, yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And with the whole thing with Jones is that he gave that impression. The only reason why I might have known a little bit more where you were able to know him in the rugby field is because I saw him always studying at ceremonial company. So he was there for the same reason. We had that movie with what was that movie with Roddy Piper? They live with the
Oh, they live,
glasses,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it was like we were walking around with that because of the whole study thing. And I just remember we I don't know, we'd come across each other. I wasn't a real close person. He was really close to Heald and all that. And you're right. I mean, he was out at B Town with, at Rasputin's with you and the rest of everyone. But I just always remember, like talking about like grade point average, and he just had like this extraordinary grade point average, and just a beast as far as academics. Ironically enough, he started at Columbia. I think he finished his MBA at Columbia. They were grooming him for admiral, like when I started my program or something like that. But amazing guy, yeah, like that, like him. Even I just remember, part of my communications thing with this podcast is influenced by Norwich. Uh, Ironically enough, Meehan Sean Meehan. And again, guys that I would have never, I'm the surfer guy, I would never have like any type of connection with outside of Norwich. But Sean Meehan and that one guy, really, really good guy, he ended up, and you know the story how he finally graduated. Was it Kevin McGoldrick?
Oh, yeah. Kevin,
Right?
he commuted from Boston to graduate. Yeah, every day,
It's
every week.
crazy. But they
Yeah.
were in charge of with Gus Buhollis and Dan Corzin, the special forces guy, just to let you, as you know, all these wild personalities in the communications hooch at WNUB, the Norwich radio station. And we were doing politics shows. And I just remember Meehan and McGoldrick, I remember, they'd invite me and they're like, well, we need what are your contrasting views? What are, they knew communications. We're talking about guys that, we're like 19, 20, 21 years old,
Yeah, not even,
just,
not even.
yeah. And they knew
Kevin
issues.
McGoldrick had
Yeah.
he had the opportunity to go to the Boston Police Academy.
Wow.
So that's what he's like. Yeah, it's a once in a lifetime thing. I'll figure out Norwich after. So he did. He went through the academy. He just retired recently as like one of the police commissioners in Boston. He had an amazing career, but he commuted back. I think he took a year or two off to start the police thing, Then he took some time where he commuted back and forth from Boston and finished his degree. I mean, it's amazing,
Yeah.
amazing, because he had that ring. He wanted the sheepskin to go along with it. And it's amazing.
Yeah. And they what impressed me is that they really knew the issues, and again, politics back then. And I always talk about back then, you know, you could have healthy discussions about politics and it wouldn't just go south like nowadays. And that's what I picked up from Norwich. So I wanted to ask you, what did you pick up from Norwich that's like lasting?
I think a lot of it is, none of it's academic. I think all of it has to do with um, your network, your loyalty, your honesty, uh, your willingness to have your brother's back no matter what. Someone calls you at 2 o'clock in the morning and says, "I need a hand." You drop everything and you take care of it. You know, there's just that thing that, and I think it's very similar with the Marine Corps too. That it's I think Norwich is a little bit different because you have that academic part to it. So these relationships you have as a younger man are with intelligent people. And I don't want to say, I don't mean to say that Marine Corps is not intelligent. It's just
Okay.
it's next level, you know.
Yes.
And some of the guys that we went to school with have gone on to have amazing military careers. There are guys that are, 1 and 2 star admirals, 1 and 2 star, Marine generals, Army generals, guys that went on and did 20 plus years as Navy SEALs, as special forces in the Army, as, you know, great pilots. And I ran some Mickey Warbrick
Yeah.
a year or so ago.
And he still looks
F-18
like he's
pilot.
30.
Yeah. I mean, he's an F-18 superstar.
Oh,
You know,
what,
he's
really? Was he F-18. Gosh,
yeah.
I didn't expect anything less, but gosh, it's great to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And yeah, so I mean, every time I run into somebody, or I don't know if you remember Eric Callaghy.
I think, yeah.
Eric Callaghy was, I believe, it's like from California. He was like a surfer type. He was
Yeah.
in our reserve unit. So after Desert Storm, after Norwich, he cross-branched into the Navy and became a SEAL. I ran into him at alumni weekend, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. He's with DevGru. He's he went from being this reservist that's dispendable to becoming SEAL Team 6, and he was an operator. He was, and to look at him as a 40-something-year-old man, the fitness level he was at was probably the best it's ever been in his life. And it's one of those things that 18, 19 years old, do you think about this, you think about that, but it's not until your 30s where you become a man, and you really, I mean, you develop other things. You develop, your mental strength, your emotional strength, which is so difficult, and your physical strength. It's like you get in a fist fight as a kid on the playground, you're like, oh, blah, blah, blah. You get punched by a man, and you know the difference between that punch and that kid that from sixth grade, So
Yeah.
it's different. But yeah, there's I'd have to say my thing I pulled out of Norwich is definitely having a network of friends that is based on loyalty, respect, uh, having our boots on the same sand, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was definitely those things that, whether you're some kid from Roxbury or whatever, or you're a kid from Northfield, Vermont, that bond happens, and whatever the periphery is or minutia is, it stays out there, and it's that bond that at the center of it.
I explained that to folks when I ended up switching, not switching, but just putting certain things on hold in regards to psychoanalysis and war trauma, and looking a lot into like race, culture, uh racial trauma in the military, but looking at it in a way that's really examined, really has a sense of integrity to it, not something like I don't want to I don't want to I don't want to be scrutiny focused, but I will. But when the book White Fragility came out, I really felt it problematic because I said all the work that's been set up to try to improve things here, this book is really going to shatter things, because though there might be points in the book that might be valid, the book is in many ways, in my opinion, kind of taking advantage of a sad situation, the George Floyd situation, and it has caused a certain level of division. But what I say is, and that's just my interpretation. Uh, there are many different interpretations of that book, but I just say that, and because my academic studies of race, and I just finished, designing a course as far as how to teach race in a military college setting like Norwich or at West Point. And mine would involve many different, objective uh, testing, for example, like the cultural workplace questionnaire, the CWQ that's used in MBA schools, all throughout the world, or the IDI, the intercultural, development inventory. These things that are designed, that are more objective, that can kind of like sense where people are at and have greater discussions. The military uses them. They've been using these type of tests for a while. Getting involved in really more constructive conversations about race, um, to improve situations, to enlighten officers and NCOs, to deal with troops, because the bottom line is you have to deal with troops. And as you know, and I know, and I believe this in you, and I'd like you to say some things after I shut my trap, but you and I both know that a failure in leadership is not necessarily always, and not even most of the time, on that object of failure, but more on you not being able to bring that object of failure up to a transcending level, right? Not
Mhm.
being able to bring that person up. I just know that you're that way, and I'm not speaking uh, for you. I know you. I've known you for a real long time, and I know that Norwich. What I'm about to say is that at Norwich, I feel very different, and I knew a lot of throughout my checkered military past, and my checkered military journeys, where I'd come across West Point cadets, Citadel cadets, uh, VMI cadets, who ended up going into the military and everything. I don't feel as though they received that type of training, where in at Norwich, you could be the problem child. I called myself the no child, because I just ghost. I just focused on academics and was a ghost, and hung out with jokes and B town with the ladies and all that, and with the guys too, to be more politically correct. But the thing is that what I learned at Norwich, and I want you to say something about this, is that this whole thing of like race, as well as gender and orientation. We knew there were gay guys, at Norwich. We knew that there are women, people of color at Norwich. But at least, and I know there's been problems. I know a couple of years ago there was a little scandal there, but I know that when we went to school, there was something important about discussion. And even in the classroom, I remember, General Michael Hester, right? Is that his name?
Mhm.
Mike
Mike
Hester.
Hester. Yep.
I remember I was in a class with him. I wouldn't say I got along with him, big bulking, guy from Massachusetts, right? Or something, from New England, very articulate, but also very arrogant. And I was pretty arrogant from Florida, a lot smaller. But the discussions in class, for example, how we spoke about like the Civil War and different things like that, in a very constructive manner. Not that he was actually defending, he had a knowledge of the 54th Massachusetts, the colored troop unit, and he was, offering a lot of information to the class about that topic, and just having that at Norwich and having the discussions and knowing different people, I think was an advantage versus not having that. And whereas like the Citadel, where I knew guys who were attending the Citadel, or I'd visit and stuff like that on break at times, where that just, it was all trying to be uniformed, and that was it. And I would sense that would be a major problem once getting commissioned, or becoming an NCO, or going into special operations and having to experience a whole different reality, I just wanted to kind of like find out if you felt that at Norwich there was just something about that, right? Like recognizing that leadership also was a burden on the leader, not just on the led.
Right. I think that, and this is me looking back on it, not me thinking of it as I was going through it,
Yeah.
that Norwich was always the underdog, the small school, the, whatever it was, we had a high percentage of students that went on to be civilians that were military. The competition to become military officer at Norwich is nothing like the competition at Annapolis or West Point or the Air Force Academy, where they're thinking about their careers as officers and as general officers from the day they step on campus. So they have to be that number one grad. They do whatever they can to get there. They don't care who they step on along the way. And unfortunately, as a young man or a young woman, you don't have the same vision, the same breadth of knowledge that you would as a 30 or 40-year-old person who's already at the end of their career now. So I think, I guess, was there racism at Norwich? I'm going to say yes. I think that when you have small-minded, ignorant people and you get together, mix in alcohol for the first time, and people are going to say things. And it's funny, people say, oh, I didn't mean to say that. No, you meant to say it. You just weren't aware of what the outcome would be when you said that. Because if you say something that's racist, and say whatever it is, say I'm a person of color, and I say something about someone who's Filipino. Now, it's not that I said something that was off color or unkind about one race or one person. I'm now a racist against everybody who's different, because everyone's going to see that. So I think that if you're going to deal with people, and I go back to having a network of friends and whatnot, it has to be based on things other than superficial. If I'm friends with Mike Kim, I'm friends with Mike Kim the person, not Mike Kim the Asian or whatever. I mean, why would, if I in it, maybe when you were born and they check the box, and it says it's male, it's Buddy, he's male, check, and he's white, check. That was probably the only time in my life that was important, because it's important to the doctor to check a box. Mm-hmm. Where I come from or who I am, I can't change any of that, but I can be respectful of other people, and I can also try to mentor and educate. So we go back to where we're talking about being the leader. If I am a white officer in the Marine Corps, and I have say I'm a platoon commander, and I have 65 young Marines from all over the country all different walks of life. I have to look at 65 people and look at what their assets are and what they can do for me and my Marine Corps. I can't look at it and say, well, if I have out of these 65, I have 30 black troop, I have 20 white troop, I have this. What what importance does that do? Where does that take my mental energy and away from being what I'm supposed to be doing as a leader? And I need to know everything big picture and be able to present it down to the troops. So whatever our mission is, our mission gets done. I need to be able to take what the assets are and the liabilities of every individual and work on it. If they have an asset, I want to say, great, you're awesome at that. Maybe you can help, private number 3 over here as a challenge with that. We'll get you in the same fire team or whatever it is. But if you're I can't spend that kind of mental energy, whether it's race, religion, sexual orientation, whatever that is. It's all aside. And I think is if I'm a young lieutenant back when I was in my early 20s, it would have been a huge challenge for me. I don't have at 25 years old,
Right.
I don't have the maturity or the vision that I do now. And I don't know where I would get that from other than looking at senior officers and saying, this guy's doing it right or this guy's doing it wrong, and follow him as opposed to following this other guy. So again, that's probably one of those things that you get in with the right crowd at Norwich. I don't think there's many of the wrong crowd, but I would say that, like, if you're going to say Norwich University, there's no drugs, there's no racism, there's no stealing, and there's no cheating. It's all there. That's human nature. If you get put into a situation and you have a lack of character and you have the opportunity to cheat and get an A or not cheat and get a C, if you don't have the character to not cheat and maybe take the time to study harder and get a B, you're better off than cheating and getting that A, because that you didn't earn that A. All you did was earn a piece with a race part of your character. You're born with this beautiful picture of who you're going to be, and every time you make a bad decision, little parts of that get erased away. Next thing you know, you're 40, 50 years old and you're a shadow of the person you could have been.
I like how you described it, and I actually think I'll probably have to quote you, in some of my future stuff that I continue to evolve with as far as research, because I do think you're right in the sense that people don't have the time to deal with these pressing things, and I think whether you're at the Naval War College, doing these studies on Marine officers, as far as, wanting to, satisfy, Senate demands on, political correctness and all that kind of stuff, cultural sensitivity. And then on the other side where, you don't have, your boots on the ground and you're a young lieutenant and you can't, or you're a young ensign and you weren't exposed to it. And not only that, you're stressed out by the job in itself. You're thinking about, if you're even going to make it to captain, and so you presented something quite interesting that I was able to think about as far as how I'm trying to, pose these questions of race and everything, because you're right. There's this lack of time, energy, and exposure on one end, and then on the other end, you've got, the cushy kind of like, navel gazing that, and the rank and the power that's available to maybe, work with some of those things, like in the PME, professional military education, with the Naval War College, Army War College, and all that kind of stuff, that setting. And then my thing is I'm trying to find like middle ground, which I think, you know, having someone like you or you know, Robert Gaboni or, you know, Jimmy Fallon, you know, these, you know, Jones or the Bush, Harding Bush or something to be in discussions, right? About, well, you know, how, like a case scenario, you know, a troop of Marines, grandmother died, you know, she raised him, and she dies and he's UA, you know, and he grew up at, you know, his with her African American tradition, you know, that's like, you know, so important. And the exposure that that lieutenant, you know, or an NCO over that boot wouldn't have like that type of data to make the decisions. And the different conversations in the middle, I think, don't take away the time, like what you're saying, which is like important, but can add more data. And that's the approach that I'm coming from, always producing more accurate data about folks and their backgrounds, whether it's race or class. The things that I think I was connected to you like at Norwich, and we made a little joke earlier prior to filming, and it was just it was data, right? That you and I connected to a certain extent because I knew something that you didn't know, and then you knew something I didn't know, you know, and we exchanged that. And I found that at Norwich, like you said, I found it powerful that guys were not, like you said, they weren't like maybe like at the Naval Academy or West Point or Air Force Academy or Coast Guard Academy already thinking about stars from the beginning, but more like, how do I even get this commission, or how do I, you know, graduate and become successful once I graduate? And what is it that I'm going to pick up from these different people? Like today, this guy may be a jerk, but tomorrow he may be a friend, and all these different types of exchanges. I don't know. For me at Norwich, they were tremendous. And hearing from you, it's like, I don't know, it just kind of mirrors some of some of my thoughts as far as like where I want to go with this understanding of like understanding race and class in the military and gender and all that.
It's hard. It really is. I think that I mean, it's funny. Agenda, I think, is the key. I think some people have a positive agenda where they want to do the best they can to make the best out of it and try to figure a way to navigate through some of the challenges. Then other people just have a negative agenda where they want to be hateful and they want to make everyone around them miserable and hateful too. So it's I don't know. I don't believe in things like, you know, you hear people say you can take the kid out of the trailer park, but you can't take the trailer park out of the kid. I think that whatever your environment is growing up, it is what it is. So either you can use it as this huge albatross that's around your neck that's going to drown you every day, or you can use it as something, you know what? That's where I started. That was the first foundation of where I started. When I first stood up, that's where my boots were. So what do you do with it? You know?
I think that's a great thing. I think that on a macro level, as far as when we look at like these different issues, that these cultural issues in the military, I think we have to be honest on all levels and look at where, just like you said, you know, where did we start? You know what I mean? Where are we? You know, if it wasn't for the great Admiral Zumwalt, you know, I mean, he just totally like had all the rates, and he made the Marine Corps kind of like, you know, just equalize all the different jobs and MOSs and rates in the Navy were, you know, if you were black or Filipino or whatever, you know, person of color, you weren't going to be like in the galley, you know, doing, you know, steward work or doing, cooked stuff, and that's something that, a lot of people don't recognize, that even in civilian world, you're not going to find a big CEO that's going to like radically change, a white CEO like Admiral Zumwalt just radically change things because he recognized that, the times, as Bob Dylan, saying, times are
They're
changing.
changing. Yeah, I
Yeah.
get it.
And so what you said is useful to me because it is important to look not just on a micro level, how individuals have to see themselves, like where they start and where they're going and where they want to go, but on a macro level, with groups and organizations, especially tied to the military. So I really appreciate that. What, getting back, I know I kind of took the conversation on a whole nother course, but going back to where you were in regards to the entrepreneurship, um, tell us about, like, before we go into the humanitarian stuff, or wait, yeah, we were talking about the entrepreneurial stuff, or what were you talking about, the humanitarian stuff? Which
I think
one?
we've been around. We've touched a lot of things.
Okay, all right. So we'll go to the entrepreneurial stuff and then go into humanit the humanitarian uh aspects of things. But just because we're talking about organizations and all this and individual change, what I think it's fantastic, to those listeners who aren't aware of like what you've been able to start and some of the different projects in regards to your company and taking your talents of sales to set that up. Can you give folks some information about that?
Sure. So what I have is, and I don't want to sound like I'm being funny or anything, but I have a small town gun shop, and we have an indoor range. And what we try to do is to be as inclusive as we can and not be exclusive. Because if you're a gun person and you've been in gun shops, there are the gun shops you go into that are dark, and the guy's got a half lit cigar and he doesn't even look up. He's reading, or now it's not reading the newspaper anymore. He's on his computer or whatever. And you can walk in with your pockets fat with cash. And if you don't look like the guy that he's looking to sell something to, he's not even going to look up at you. And that happens, or you have the female shooter that are first time walking into a gun shop and they talk to that guy that says, "Hey, little lady, maybe you should try this little revolver. It's perfect for you." What I tell people, by folks that we work together, I say, it's never about the money. It's about the relationship. And you need to know who you're selling to so they get what they're looking for and you provide it. So I'm not the used car salesman where I have, well, I got 15 Glocks in the back room. You got to push Glocks today. It's not like that at all. We try to run the business as a family first. So all the folks I work with are all part of my family. And my one requirement I have of when we hire somebody is, do I want that person sitting at the dinner table with my family? If they pass that, then we can do anything. We can teach them anything. We can help them with anything, and we move on from there. So we, um, again, we try to be inclusive. I have a black mat that's on the floor when you walk in, so when you walk in that front door, I tell people it's the LZ. That's where the customer lands. And before they move off the X, you need to say something. You need to say good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is. Even if you look at them and say, sup, that's okay. You've made contact. Now leave them alone. Let them look around a little bit. Give them a couple of minutes to breathe. Give them a couple of minutes to get into the store and feel comfortable. Then ask them, don't ask them a yes or no question like, can I help you find something? Most people are going to say no. You say, how are you doing today? Or what brings you in today? Or even get them into like, what kind of shooting do you do? And it's those open-ended questions where you develop that relationship.
Mhm.
And we want to do everything. We do, I mean, as a business person, you want all their money, but that's not the reality of life. We want them to be comfortable and come back. So we just try to be as inclusive as we can. When we did everything, we built the building and developed the range and we priced all our firearms. Everything is priced fairly. We don't haggle. We have fair prices.
Mm.
Our range time, we did research on 3 states around us, and we are the lowest price per hour range because it's not about the money. We want people to come in and use the range. We want them to be safe. We want them to be educated. We want them to be well supplied. So that's what we do. It's very simple. It sounds like it's not going to work, but it's been working so far. We have very loyal customers. We have people that come in and won't even know who they are, but they were treated well, and then they do a Google review or a Yelp review, whatever, and they say some really kind things. Or they go on the website and they find my email address and they send me an email and they say very kind things. And when that happens, I look at that as a huge success. So that person, we have a morning meeting every day. If I have an email that is a positive email like that, I bring it up and the next meeting we have. We don't always get good reviews. Sometimes we get negative reviews.
How do you deal with that?
Well, I was going to say the negative review never comes up in that morning meeting. I'll take someone aside and I'll say, "This is what I got. Tell me about it."
Mm.
Because it could be a miscommunication. And I tell people, unless you're trying to burn the building down, I don't know of anything that would get you fired today. So what we do first is identify what it was. Was it a problem? Was it a misunderstanding? Was it a challenge? Is it something that we can overcome moving forward? Was it something that was, like I say, misunderstanding? Was my salesperson not informed enough about it? What happened? And then we move forward. And then we say, all right, this is what you need to learn. This is what we need to help you with. If you repeat it and this becomes regular behavior, that's a different story. And then we need to have a different conversation. But unless you steal something, unless you do something like sexual harassment, or you're trying to hurt somebody, or something that's blatantly malicious, you're not going to get fired. Excuse me.
What would you tell someone who's like, folks in my camp, my political camp, like the progressive who's like interested in getting involved in either hunting or home protection or something like that, or defense? If they're coming to you, what I know you have all kinds of different folks, but how could you communicate to some of my listeners that may not be aware of like the Second Amendment as much as, or is that it's not even the Second Amendment, just exposure to gun culture. I call it gun culture because I was exposed to it as a kid, but I am very progressive. But I'm just wondering, what can you share? Because you're in the industry, what can you share for someone that would be interested in getting involved in it? Firearms.
It's very tough these days because of the environment we have. There's been, I mean, if there was one school shooting, it's way too many, but there's been too many things like that. There's been church shootings. There was just a shooting in a mall in Texas, and all these things that are so negative that I don't know if I can fix that.
Right.
I try them. I try to be, like I say, educate as best I can. But like I said before, when you strike up a conversation with somebody, it's not very often that someone comes in and says, "I don't know anything about guns. Can you teach me because I want to go on an elk hunt next fall?" That doesn't happen very often. But if it did, I'd say, you know what? I applaud you for coming in a year ahead of time and figuring this out. Because in my world, in the hunting world, if you go out uneducated and you just wound an animal, that is unethical, and that is not what we're trying to do. Hunting is very much about preserving herds of animals and making sure that they don't overpopulate and they don't end up wiping themselves out. So having an ethical shoot is important. Uh, Doing something with the meat, if you shoot a deer just to get a head for a trophy and you leave the body in the woods, that's a sin to me. There's too many hungry people out there that if you want to do that, tell me where it is and I'll go drag it out and I'll cut it, clean it, and I'll make sure that meat gets someone who's hungry. But if someone comes in and they want to learn how to shoot for whatever reason, or they want to get involved with firearms for whatever reason, I try to ask them as many questions as I can. What do you want to do? Well, I want to have something for home protection. I was talking to a buddy of mine. They said I need a Glock 19 for home protection, and it's maybe it's a 30-something, 5-foot tall female. That might not be the right answer for you for home defense. Maybe a semi-automatic shotgun or something like that, or whatever it is. There's a lot of questions that have to be asked. Do you own or do you rent? Do you have kids at home? Do you have pets at home? There's a lot of things, because a handgun or a rifle, a lot of penetration with that round. You go through walls and it would kill the family dog on accident, right? But with birdshot, it's not going to penetrate through your walls. But if there's an intruder that's wanting to cause you harm and hurt your family, you can use that to defend yourself and defend your family. Everyone's different. Like I say, when people come in, whatever the thing is, we just need to move them off the X. And it's by questions and answers. So I don't have an answer for everybody, but I think the same process works for everybody. It might take them in different directions, but the process is there.
Well, I'm impressed because like I said, I've come across, growing up in the South, a lot of those dealerships with the Nobly cigar, and he's looking at the paper back then and no computers, and he's not asking questions like what you're saying. And it does make a huge difference asking questions and providing information and networks and the different people to be linked up with. So I appreciate what you're saying, and this is great for our audience. We can go on, and I'll do another show hopefully when you're free, and we can continue this talk. But I also want to find out about the humanitarian projects that the main project I want to know, because we at Veteran Etc. really try to promote veterans who are also giving back. And I know we spoke about that before, but I know you started an organization, and I just wanted folks to know more about that, because that could be very helpful.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people that struggle with PTSD or just PTS. I'm not a fan of the disorder side of it, because I don't think it's people are there's different things that people say it's a post-traumatic stress injury, whatever. It's just dealing with the trauma. Trauma is one of those things that can be exhausting for people. Hypervigilance, the paranoia, the hunkering down and not interacting with other humans, or there's a lot of things that go on that are related to stress, post-traumatic stress. And it's not just military people either. I mean, there's first responders, there's anybody can have post-traumatic stress. I'm only focusing on what I know because of how I've experienced it in my life. So what I have found that has been something that helps with coping with post-traumatic stress, and I feel like there is there's like vicarious trauma. If if you weren't the person who you are and have that therapy training and that experience, that if someone came to you and talked about a battlefield incident, that vicarious trauma is like, now I have the trauma and now I'm sharing that trauma with you, and now you share the trauma with me. I believe there's also vicarious resilience.
Mhm.
So when you get a group of people that have been through the same experiences and you get them together, they have a certain language, they have um, they have similar backgrounds and similar stories. So when we do things, the name of the organization is called On the Hunt Veteran Strong. The idea was, I was trying to be a wordsmith a little bit, and on the hunt was on the hunt looking for different ways to cope. So, but when I say on the hunt, people automatically focus towards shooting and guns and things like that, which isn't the right thing for everybody. So we also do a lot of things. We have, like this summer, we have 6 deep sea fishing trips planned for the summer, where, yeah, we could take 10 veterans per boat ride. And the beautiful thing is it's a captive audience. They can't go anywhere. It's an 8-hour day. They can't go anywhere. They have to interact with somebody. So we have folks that go on, that are veterans that go on these trips. We also have folks that are I'll call them sponsors. So they'll say the boat is $2,000 to go out. I want to donate $400. I want to take a veteran and I want to go myself. Sure, whatever it is. And we have conversations. We're out in the fresh air. We do whatever it is. We provide meals and snacks and stuff like that, so you don't need for anything. And hopefully, at the end of the day, you've interacted enough that a dark place you might have been, maybe there's a little light shining on it now. But you also know now you're part of the network. Because if we go out and say, Joe here and Mary here and Hank here, whatever, now you can exchange phone numbers and you can do some of this stuff on your own, or you can say, you know what, I want to go to lunch, I want to go grab a slice of pizza, whatever it is. So we do our thing, which we try to help giving ways to cope, but now these people can pay it forward in whatever way that they know how to, if they can. If they can't, then they continue to come with us. And it's okay either way. We're not looking to create an army of miraculous healers out there, but we want people to remember back to that tribe, that important, that belonging, and having purpose. So we want that to happen, whether it's a trip, a hunting trip, it's out camping, doing, we call it winter survival. We do a camping trip in the wintertime where you have to create shelter and create fire. And it's awesome. We do things, we go on snowmobile trips, we do side-by-side trips. We do, the fishing is not just deep sea fishing, it could be standing on the side of a pond with another guy, and you could stand next to each other for 6 hours and not say a word, and it's still healing because they're not sitting in front of their TV or sitting in front of their computer. So that's what we're trying to do. We have a website, it's out there. We're a 501c3 corporation. We're very legitimate.
So what's the
100%.
website? What's the website?
It's onthehuntveteranstrong.org. And there's some info there. We're new with some of the pictures, so unfortunately some of the pictures are this face, but as we get more and more people involved in it, we're taking out some of the, I'll say, stock photos and putting different pictures in. Some of the programs, like we just, my buddy Jimmy and I, who started this, we spent the last 8 months or so on different hunting trips. We're vetting different organizations. We went all over the place. We went out to Adam Vinatieri's record-breaking ranch out in Missouri and went hunting out there. And different places that said that they were veteran-centric or veteran-friendly, and we were doing our thing. So then 2 months ago, we took all the meat that we had butchered, that we had in our freezers, over 2,000 pounds, and we donated it to an organization called Veterans Are Hungry. So there are guys out there that are eating well now because of what we did. But we're at the point now where we need to get help with other people funding. And we've been reaching out to individuals and corporations, and we're starting to get people that are supporting us, and it's really good. I mean, if it's your company and you're looking for a veteran organization because you want to look good for your clientele or potential clientele, that's fine. I don't care why you want to donate or why you want to do what you want to do, as long as we get the opportunity to help veterans. So that's what we're trying to do. But if you're General Electric and you want to make a donation, we'll take pictures. We'll have a General Electric banner that we'll have in the background, and we'll forward you those pictures at the end of the day. So again, it's not about me. It's not about the corporations. It's about the veterans and getting them into the outdoors.
I think you said something that's so powerful, and it's connected. Like I said, a lot of people think I'm just tie-dyed, unionist, peace freak, but I really appreciate being in the outdoors. And some of my best moments were like at my dad's farm in Mississippi when he had it, and being on a tree stand, and also just hiking and being in the outdoors. That has truly helped me on many levels. So I really support everything that you do. I do believe you have something original as far as your own concept, as far as saying, yeah, the alternative is a vicarious resilience. I haven't, in the trauma literature that I've read, what you're saying is something very profound, and I would coin that. I would even trademark that, because you are saying something, and it is something important, and it is consistent with the things that you're doing and how you're relating with other veterans. And I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you for your presence on the show. I want to have a continued discussion with you on things. And if you have any last words, and again, contacts in regards to the gun shop, as well as the organization, again, the nonprofit organization again. And any last words along with that?
Yeah, the gun shop is Renaissance Firearms, where website is renarms.com, renarms.com. We are located in Barrington, New Hampshire, which is considered the seacoast. We're on Route 125. It's the major route that goes across the southern part of the state into Massachusetts. And our nonprofit is On the Hunt Veteran Strong. We have our own website, which is onthehuntveteranstrong.org. You can see some of the things that we've done. We have some pictures and whatnot. We also have a link where you can donate, and we'll take anything from $1 to $1 million, and it all goes to the veterans. There is no corporate board that takes a salary. There is a processing fee that goes through with our website that they take a couple percentage to facilitate credit cards and things like that. But other than that, 100%.
You're not doing any Wounded Warrior galas, or
No,
anything like that. I'm not hitting on them. They've supposedly changed their act. I'm just talking about the old days of Wounded Warrior, where it was just huge galas and celebrity vet world and all that. That's very different to the stuff that is going on now. And
yeah, we're not doing anything like that. We're trying to, we're trying to do right things right.
Yes. And I know you are, and you're someone that I've known for many years, and always feel a sense of trust, and I've always felt comfortable reaching out to. So thank you, and a huge seance to you, and Semper Fi, brother. And always, we'll be connected and hope to see you soon on another episode.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. You're the best. I look up to you and enjoy all your social media stuff, and love you, brother.
I love you too. And just so folks know, you know, he said to me, Buddy said, you know, I could talk to him about anything, and he knows how I am. In Spanish they call him atrevido. It means like you're like you kind of get involved into shit. That's me, and that's how I am. And I just wanted to get this discussion on many different levels today, because I feel that's what veteran culture is all about. It's about knowing each other and our places and what we want out of our readjustment and reintegration and our, you know, hopes and aspirations and our differences. And I just feel blessed, you know, that I have you in my life, and one of the few guys that I know that, like I said, can always talk and can always listen and can always provide great discourse. So I appreciate you.
Awesome. Same here, brother.
All right, brother. Go well.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Yes. Outstanding.
Veteran Etc. invites you to join us again with your host, Mike Kim, every Sunday. If the content from this podcast is informative to you, please share the podcast with others. Give a like and/or post something you learned from the episode on social media. If interested in other truly informative podcasts like Veteran Etc., check out cominghomewell.com for a listing of other veteran-based podcasts. Thank you for tuning in.